Welcome everybody. Today's conversation is about synthetic users, which I think is the new frontier of product discovery. My name is Valerio Zanini. I am originally from Italy. I have been living in the United States for the last 20 years, and I spent my career mostly in digital product management. Most recently, I run a consulting company in Washington, D.C. We do training and consulting for product management, agile practices, and AI practices for product teams. I run a training program for AI for product managers, and I also publish a book on this topic. So I'm very passionate about this topic, and without any additional information, let's jump in. So, what is the problem with customer discovery? Product managers, product teams, they know that customer discovery is important. They know it's useful to source customer frustration, customer problems, understand opportunities, validate hypotheses. The problem is most teams skip discovery. It's not from laziness, not from friction. It's because it is too slow to do it. It takes days, weeks to organize and then conduct customer interviews. It is expensive, and often because it's difficult to have access to the customers. This is often a problem. Sometimes companies need to have legal approval to go to customers. Sometimes, especially in B2B situations, it's actually hard to get access to the customers. So as a result, we pretend to do discovery. The reality is that people don't do it. They just skip and go to the delivery or building solutions. I believe synthetic users are actually a great solution to that problem, a great bridge. So let me share first what are synthetic users, and then we're going to look at the specific details. Synthetic users are an AI-generated virtual representations of the target customers or the end users of your product. And we can use them to interview them. We can run usability tests with them. We can explore frustrations, workarounds, opportunities, understand their goals, much like we will do with real human users. And we can use them to practice interview guides, for example, before we conduct the interview with real humans. So in general, they are, we can call them AI-generated personas. The important is that they are built from real data. So the more I have real data about my customers, for example, customer support tickets or market research about my customers, the more I can feed the system with real information, and the more the synthetic users become realistic. They are fully interactive, so I can interview them, I can give them scenarios, I can explore their frustrations. And most importantly, they are available now. So there is no need for scheduling, for recruitment, for legal approval. We can interview them right now, and we can do that at scale. For B2B, this actually becomes a big opportunity, because what used to be the problem with B2B discovery is now easily addressable. So in B2B, typically, we sell a product to a company, but the real users, which are the employees of the company, are 2 or 3 steps away from the people we actually interact with. So getting their feedback, doing customer discovery with real end users is actually often very hard. We may never do that because we may not have direct access to those employees. Now with synthetic users, we can do that. We can create synthetic users of the end users of our customers, and now we can stress test assumptions, we can interview them, we can discover deeper problems or frustrations. The key here is that we need to have the data to feed the system and make it as realistic as possible. So we will talk more about this a little bit later. let me share with you a real study I did, because I wanted to put this in practice and I wanted to see how good this really is. So I did the study, and the problem I was researching was for solo entrepreneurs, in general, people working from home, they may miss the water cooler moment. That spontaneous, unplanned interaction that I may have in the office when I meet somebody else. I meet a colleague, another employee, I may start a conversation, I may learn something new, I may develop a friendship. But if you're working from home, you're missing all of that. So my assumption was that people crave a need for human connection, and they compensate for it in different ways. For example, they go work in a coffee shop. So I conducted a study, and I wanted to understand more about this need and the problem. I ran 2 studies in parallel, one with synthetic users, the other one with real humans. Same problem statement, same interview guide, same approach to do the synthesis. Now with the synthetic users, I did that in a few minutes. I created 3 synthetic users, I conducted the interview, I synthesized those interviews, and I generated insights. All of that in maybe in an hour. With real humans, I had to find them. So I scheduled some time, a free day in my calendar, and I went to a coffee shop where I knew there were a lot of people working on their laptop and doing work. I randomly interviewed a few of them, and I qualified them being entrepreneurs in my target segment, and I ran the same interview guide, and then I recorded the interviews and I created transcripts. And then finally I ran those transcripts into the same synthesis approach. So at the end I could compare the synthetic user research with the real human research. And the findings actually were really surprising. There were a few things I did not expect. The first one was that synthetic users went really deep on emotions, much more than the humans did. And that to me was really surprising. I felt the synthetic user had no performance anxiety. They were like very open about their feelings, their frustrations, the emotions around it. It felt very honest. Whereas on the human side, I felt they were more guarded, less open to share emotions. But what was interesting on the human side, and that did not happen with the synthetic users, was that edge case. The edge case rooted in real human lived experience. Things that AI may not know about what really shows up in real life for us humans. So I'll give you an example. And so first I want to say synthetic users don't feel more, they just perform less because they don't edit themselves, they don't have an ego on the line. But then to give you the example, the mom. This is a lady that has a young infant at home, and a couple of times a week she hires a babysitter. So the babysitter can stay with the baby while the mom can leave and go work for a few hours in a coffee shop. Not because she cannot work from home, but because she wants her space. She needs her heads down space that she cannot get home. That is a edge case rooted in real human experience that really AI cannot surface, because AI is not a parent. It doesn't know what it means to be a parent, at the same time have professional responsibilities and needed the headspace to be able to concentrate. So what synthetic users are not, they are not a replacement for real customer research. However, because of the study I did, I concluded that the synthetic user research can get us 85% close to what we can do in a human research. Now, that 85% that we can do in an hour instead of weeks is a huge acceleration. Not only that, because now we can do that quickly and maybe more often, we can expand our understanding because we may discover new hypotheses. We may discover new hypotheses, we may discover new insights, new problems that we didn't expect, we didn't know about. So now we can expand the scope of our research, and we may focus more, because now when we go to talk to real humans, we don't need to do the whole thing. We just need to focus on the remaining 15-20%. Now we can focus the interview on the key insights that really matter. However, there are some problems. Nothing is perfect, and I think the main problem is, can I trust this research? Can I trust the synthetic users? And I think that comes down to really three failure modes. The first one is hallucinations. We all know what hallucinations are. AI models invent answers and they pretend to be confident about these answers, when in reality they have no data to support this. So we need to always be on the lookout for possible hallucinations. And of course, we can. There are ways around it. One is to really check for the actual data that the AI is using in providing the answer. The other one is to feed the data to the AI, especially if you are researching business spaces or contexts that are a little bit removed from what the typical training data are for the AI model. An example could be a specific B2B case. We need to feed the data before we can get reasonable answers. The second problem is the algorithmic average. We know how AI works. It is a probabilistic engine, so it gives us the most statistically relevant answer every time we ask an information or a question, which means we tend to get average answers, because the average is probably, like a bell curve, is probably the most statistically significant. Whereas in research, what we are looking for is not really the average, it's more like the edge cases. So there is a gap there, and we need to force the synthetic users to really give us these edge cases, the non-obvious information, so that they become more realistic and they may be useful to expand our understanding. The third one is what I call the discovery atrophy. Teams try synthetic research, they get mere results, and then they go back to doing nothing at all. This is a big problem, actually, probably the worst problem, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. What's missing here is not the tool. So yes, the tool has limitations, we know that. And the fact that we got some non-interesting, non-valuable answers in the first round doesn't mean that the tool itself is not working. What is the problem here very often is the skill. These are teams that maybe they never did customer discovery in the first place. So they never built the muscle to actually do it properly and learn how to distinguish between the average answer, something ambiguous, compared to something non-obvious and actually very useful insight. So now they try synthetic users, it doesn't work, and they just go back to doing nothing. Having the muscle, having the ability, having the practice on doing customer discovery is absolutely important. What synthetic users do, they accelerate their discovery practice. They cannot substitute for it. So to help with that, with the adoption of synthetic users and to prevent problems, I have a framework of 7 rules that I would like to share. These will help you avoid getting burned. The first one is the purpose of synthetic users. Synthetic user research should be used to scope the problem, scope the understanding, not to come to conclusions. So at the end, we should work out our synthetic user research with better questions, not final answers. Now, with these questions, we can take the second step and go back to human research and validate those findings, those insights. Number 2, validate the surprising. As we do discovery, we may discover something that we did not know. Maybe there's a surprise. Maybe there is something that we did not know that we did not know. And we source that. That's the expansion benefit of synthetic user research, by the way. Very, very useful. What do we do with a surprise? Go talk to a real person. Now, that is a focused conversation. Let's validate that this actually is true, is realistic in the real world, in the real human experience. Number 3, feed it real data first. In the end, quality in means quality out. Instead, if we rely on generic, we are going to get generic out. So the more data we can feed in the system, the more useful the answers will be. For example, we can load support tickets, sales transcript, customer service complaints, NPS verbatims, surveys that we have conducted, customer research that we have conducted. So the more input we fill, the less gaps there are there to fill with AI averages. Number 4, if you're working in a B2B situation, name the gap explicitly. What does it mean? The general model may not have training data specific to your B2B segment or to your B2B industry. So calling it out first allows you to identify the gap and then figure out how to fill the gap or how to calibrate the data using maybe techniques I mentioned in step 3. The key here is that call out the risk before it actually happens. Number 5, synthetic user research is not designed to replace human research and also is not designed to replace UX research teams. That's not the purpose here. I think this is actually an accelerant, an expansion benefit, an empowering benefit. This is like giving superpowers to the UX researchers, because now we can accelerate, we can test hypotheses, we can test interview guys, we can better prepare and focus our interviews, and we can conduct all of these studies in days, maybe rather than weeks, as it happened before. Number 6, push past the algorithmic average. We know that that happens. There are ways to work around it. So, for example, we need to ask the AI for edge cases. Give me answers that are not like non-obvious. Tell me about a time when this went really wrong or when it was really embarrassing. So trying to move away from the average so you can actually expand your research and find those edge cases that we are interested in. And then finally, number 7, ask what they don't know. This is about surfacing the hallucination risk before it reaches your synthesis. The point here is hallucination is always possible. We want to prevent it, but we also want to quantify it. We want to understand, is this real data? Is that real answer? Is that true? Or is it just something made up by AI? So ask it. For example, we can ask a question, where might your answer be overly generic or incomplete? Or we can even ask for an assessment of the probability, the confidence level of AI, or even for sourcing data or sources of the quotes used in the interviews. So ask what AI doesn't know before it gets a problem. So these are 7 guardrails that allow your synthetic user research to be more grounded, more focused, and in the end, more trustworthy. Now, what I would like to share, and we're going to do a demo, are ways to create and use synthetic users. So here are a couple of ways. The first one is to use an LLM. It could be Claude, Chat, GPT, Gemini, whatever your favorite LLM is, or maybe the one that is allowed in your company. So we can prompt it, and here we have, of course, maximum control. We can even customize the data for internal instances, and we can practice with prompts. So I'm going to do a demo in a second, but I also want to share that there are some tools that allow to kind of speed up and automate some of the processes. So let's start with the demo, and I'm going to start with a blank chat just for the fun of it. And I'm going to do three things. The first one is I would like to create a synthetic user. Now here, just for the demo for today, I'm going to select a relatively simple problem that maybe everybody is familiar with, and that is the food delivery problem for consumers. What already has been solved by Uber Eats, DoorDash, and so on, but maybe there is a new space, new opportunities that have not been uncovered yet. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to create a synthetic user. Here is my prompt. I am a product manager working on solving the food delivery problem for consumers. Create a synthetic user that describes a member of the customer segment I have chosen. Be as specific as possible in your description. The problem in food delivery is not delivery itself, is the removal of friction. This is my hypothesis. I would like to test more and learn more about that. The customer segment I'm choosing is the busy professionals who come home late after work and do not have time or energy for grocery shopping or cooking. Now, in terms of output, I'm going to ask the AI to generate a synthetic user with some structure. So you see the different bullet points about me, motivations and goals, describe my typical day, my needs and problem to solve, frustration with current situations and solutions. These are typical sections that I may create when I'm creating a user persona. So I'm using a very similar approach here to a typical user persona. And I'm going to run this prompt. It's going to take just a few seconds to create this user. And here we go. Using the structure I asked for. About me, my name is Marcus Webb, 34-year-old, senior account manager, and just completely random, I got Washington, D.C., where I am located. Motivation and goals. I want to eat well without it costing me the little mental energy I have left at the end of the day. Food is not just fuel for me. I care about quality, variety, and so on. So there are a couple of quotes there. I'm exhausted and starving, and I have a real meal in front of me. My typical day. So this helps us understand more about this user and what they go through. My needs and problems to solve. I need a solution that removes the decision entirely or gets me as close to that as possible. I don't need more options. I need fewer, better ones. Pre-filtered for my context. Very interesting. And then my frustration with current situation and solutions. The apps overwhelm me. DoorDash shows me 200 restaurants when I have the cognitive bandwidth to evaluate maybe 3. Right? So that seems to be a pain point in the current solutions. So notice what happened here. In just a few seconds, really, I asked AI to create a synthetic user for me, focus on the problem I am researching. I gave a little bit of the description about the problem and the customer segment. AI did everything else. And the nice thing is, because AI is probabilistic, if I run this prompt again, I will get a different synthetic user, with a different description, different set of problems. So I can run it multiple times, create multiple synthetic users, and now I have a group of people that I can interview. So our second prompt is going to be an interview guide, because in order to conduct an interview, I need to have an interview guide. So here is the prompt. I am a product owner for Uber Eats food delivery service. Create an interview guide for a discovery interview with my target audience. I'd like to learn more about motivation, needs, pain points. So there are some instructions here. Include why and tell me of a time when questions. The customer segment is the same as before. I would like to learn about pain points that my service may solve, reveal hidden behaviors and workarounds, and identify edge cases. And what I would like is a list of 7 questions. So let's run this. And again, in just a few seconds, I get my initial interview guide. I think this is a great acceleration and potentially a great expansion benefit for 2 reasons. Because first of all, when I'm preparing an interview guide, it often takes time and mental energy to just think, what kind of questions do I need to ask? How do I phrase these questions so they're not leading questions, or they're not yes or no questions? But also, I may come up with questions that they are limited to the context I am already aware of. Whereas if I ask AI, it may give me new questions that I may not even think about. I may not have thought about before. So now I'm expanding the understanding of what is possible. Now, if I don't like any one of these questions, I can of course run the prompt again, or I can edit this, right? I can copy and paste in my Word document, edit them, add my own questions, and prepare the final interview guide. All right, so that was step number 2. Now let's go step number 3. We got a synthetic user. Name of the synthetic user is Marcus Webb. We have an interview guide with 7 questions. Now let's run an interview with Marcus. So here is the prompt. You are role-playing as a customer researcher. Conduct an interview with my synthetic user following the interview guide provided. I would like to learn more about problems, needs, frustrations, and so on. So the input, the problem statement, I described that above. The description of the synthetic user, that's Marcus. And the interview guide, the 7 questions we just created. In terms of output, I would like to collect the responses and then structure the synthesis using this framework. What does the user say, think, feel, and do, which is very similar to the empathy map canvas structure. What are the user's more pressing needs? In what other ways are they solving the problem today? And then finally, is there a something surprising? So let's run this. And again, in just a few seconds, I will get a complete interview transcript from the interview guide, the 7 questions I had originally, ran with the synthetic user I specified. Now, what is interesting here is that when I run it, I often get more than 7 answers, mostly because AI is able to follow up to any answer with a follow-up question that was not originally in the interview guide. This is really what would happen in real life as well, right? When we talk to humans. In fact, here we go. We are getting more than 7 answers here. And I can see the researcher asking the question and then Marcus answering the question. Now, this is a demo and I'm going to read through each one of these. But the point here is that as a product manager or a customer researcher, I just did an interview with a synthetic user in just a few minutes. Now I can take my time to actually read through that and see whether there was something that was unexpected, a surprise. Whether the questions worked. Did the questions work? Is there any question I should change? And so on. Then I also got the research synthesis. This is often time-consuming, mentally exhausting, trying to synthesize each interview after the interview. It takes time and some energy. Here we got it in automatically done in the categories that we specify. So what the users say, think, feel, and do. And then the other categories we ask for the most pressing needs, other ways to solve, and the surprise. Now, is this perfect? I don't know. Maybe not, but certainly is a great start. And again, I did that in just a few minutes demoing this. And now I can read through this. I can iterate on my interview guide. I may iterate on the synthetic user. I may create a new one. I may specify the problem more in depth. I can iterate on this cycle a few times until I feel like I source something really interesting, a non-obvious insight. I have new hypotheses. I understand the problem better now. I know where I want to focus my customer discovery, what kind of customer I want to interview. And now this helps me prepare better for my actual discovery. And that is the remaining 15-20% I was talking about earlier. All right, so that was about using an LLM. The other demo I would like to conduct is using one of the tools available to actually automate most of this process. Because using LLM is powerful, but it also requires a lot of work. We need to save the interview, the synthesis, we save the synthetic user, we need to save the interview guide, and then reload all of the documents. So it's actually time consuming. But there are some tools that allow us to simplify all of that work. One of them is called Product Quest. This is a tool I've been working on for several months now, and I would like to showcase it because it really can help accelerate and simplify customer discovery. So here are a few sample projects. One of them is the water cooler project, the one I mentioned earlier that I did with synthetic users and with human research to compare the results. I did the same thing here in Product Quest. I specified the problem. So for example, more and more people work from home or remotely these days. Identify target user profile, solo founders working fully remotely. They lack trusted, informal peer environments where they can pressure test decisions, share uncertainty, and think out loud without performance pressure. So a little bit of information about the people I'm focusing on. Then I use the tool to create an interview guide. In fact, this interview guide with 11 questions, I may even edit it. I may change the order, I may change any one of these questions, I may delete them, I may add the new question. So I can iterate on my interview guide. And once I'm happy with that, I can go and create a synthetic user. Here I already created 5 users. If I want to create more, I just press the generate user. It asks for some additional information and then it creates a new user for me. We can open any one of those users already created and you can see there is a now about me, motivation and goals, needs a problem to solve, frustrations, constraints, so a lot of information here. If I want, I can copy it and now I can put that into a Word document or a Notion or a PowerPoint for presentation to stakeholders, for example, or I can edit it. So I can change any one of these information. This could be useful in particular if I already have user personas that I created before for this problem. I can load the information of the user persona. I can customize my synthetic user with anything that may be missing already from the AI. Once I'm happy with the users I have, I can conduct the interviews. So already I have an interview guide. I can now run an interview with any one of these users. Just for the sake of time, I already ran the interviews. If you remember, the interview guide had 11 questions, but you can see here that for any user there are 42 exchanges. So there is not only a back and forth on the interviews, but also additional questions that AI generates on the fly for each interview depending on context. I can read each one of these interviews. So now I have a full transcript with questions and answer, question and answer, question and answer. I can read all of that. I can compare. I can evaluate whether the research I did is a good starting point. I have the right questions, or maybe something is missing. I can always go back and edit my interview guide and then run the interviews again if I want. After I've done all the interviews, I can now synthesize them. So here I could do the synthesis at two levels. The first one is at the user level. So here is an example for this user, Ethan Mallory. I already ran the synthesis. So this is the synthesis of their interview. What the user says about the problem, what they think, what they feel, and so on. So all the different information, including surprises and unexpected findings. Again, I can copy this, I can put in a PowerPoint presentation, I can share it with my team or my stakeholders. When I have multiple users that I have interviewed, I can also run a cross synthesis. The goal here is to understand common themes or patterns or common problems between different users. So here I ran a cross interview synthesis, and there are a few common themes that were surfaced by the interviews. There are patterns, there are some edge cases. So all of this, there are also some contradictions between different people. They are not in agreement, and that could be another interesting space to explore. And just these activities, synthesizing the interviews or doing the cross synthesis, is time consuming, requires a lot of mental energy, often requires a meeting with my team members, the rest of the team who conducted the interviews, and coming together, so scheduling their time may be hard. So there is some complexity there. I can run everything inside one tool in just a couple hours. And then finally the insights. This is at the end is the most important thing I want to get to. Based on the interviews and the cross synthesis, the system can generate the key insights. In this case, I got 5 key insights. For example, we heard the founders don't primarily miss being around people. So it's not about company, but it's about missing a reliable way to pressure test high stakes decision quickly. That's the value of working with a team, for example, if they miss. I wonder if that means the core work from home pain to solve is decision isolation, speed and confidence, not loneliness or social ambience. So this insight now rephrases the initial problem. It's not about company or feeling loneliness, but it's about making decisions. And so as I think about possible solutions, now this may give me a different space for problem solution fit or ideation, for example. Number 3, so we have different insights. Each one of these can now be prompts for ideation. We also have need statement. When a founder is facing a time-sensitive pricing, positioning, messaging decision, users need same-day, high-signal pushback because decision quality decays quickly, but currently they either wait on calendars to get unreliable generic advice. Same thing here. Useful understanding now, and I can use these needs to then generate ideas and possible solutions that I may want to validate or prototype with. So this is Product Quest, one of the tools that could help do customer discovery with synthetic users in a much faster way. Okay, so time to wrap up our conversation. A couple of things to conclude. First, how to integrate synthetic users in discovery. I think there are 4 phases. The first one is to do hypothesis generation with synthetic users. So define the personas, conduct the interviews, source insights, and maybe surprises. And now I can focus my primary research, that's phase 2, on the real users, and I only need to validate the remaining 15-20%. So much faster than doing the whole thing. Phase 3 is analysis, analyze the data, compare maybe to what we got with the synthetic users. Is there a gap? But also gives me an understanding of how good or accurate was the research with synthetic users. And then finally, number 4 is the learning experience. This is a sort of a retrospective where I may want to reflect on how to refine my approach for the next time, if there is anything I want to improve. So finally, just to conclude today, synthetic users do not replace discovery. They just remove the excuse not to do it. And as I explained earlier, there are 4 steps here. Run synthetic users first, expand your understanding, refine your research scope, and then validate the surprising with real humans. I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation today. I hope it was useful. I covered this and other topics for in my course, AI for Product Managers, where I focus on AI discovery, ideation, validation, and then building prototypes with vibe coding. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.